Okay. We're definitely running skeleton crew this morning, but it's a good lesson.
Yes, it is.
Food for thought, just right off the top. And looking at the chapters of our lesson, first, Second Samuel and First Chronicles, right? I just want to give you some food for thought. Think about this. With all that's going on in the world right now, what seems to be the bullseye of the news nowadays? That war between the Palestinians and Israel, right? And then the Palestinians, I'm not getting political, it's just something I'm thinking about. It's biblical. They're crying out from the river to the sea. That's what they're saying. That's the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea kill all the Jews between those two places, right? That's what they mean when they say that, from the river to the sea. But you know what you discover in our reading today? That God gave David rest from all the enemies around, from Moab to Edom. Do you know where those nations are? On what? The Jordan River. And then he gave him rest from all the Philistines nations. Do you know where those were? On the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, right? And then you'll find in our lesson today, which we're not going to get to it, but just in the reading that I read, that even at the Euphrates, the cities of the Euphrates River, the kings up there honored David. So when God gave David rest from all the enemies, it's from the Euphrates River. That's where Turkey is, right? All the way down to Moab, follow that river, Moab and Edom, and then go all the way across to the Mediterranean Sea, and you know what you have? Gaza, Philistine nations and all that. So, when they cry out today, from the river to the sea, get rid of all the Jews, that must make Palestinians children of King David. Or are they Arabs? What is a Palestinian? Y'all ever figured that out? I ain't to this day figured out what a Palestinian is. They claim to be Arabs, right? Muslims? Ain't Arabs Muslims, right? When they're crying to get rid of them Jews from the river to the sea, well, our text teaches us that God gave David rest from the river, and I'm putting it this way because of this world we live in, is from the river to the sea. Subdued all the enemies from the river to the sea. Now, I don't know how much the Muslims know about what 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles says. I don't know how much they know. But think about it. I don't know if they're thinking about that when they're saying that. From the river to the sea. Well, did you know 3,000 years ago, God gave David rest and the children of Israel from the river to the sea, all the way, and he had people helping him, giving him tribute from the Euphrates River. That's just something to think about.
So when the senator of the Democrats said from the river to the sea, it made sense that they're all unloaded as senators.
Yeah.
You don't television. That's what them people protesting, crying too.
Yeah. And all this.
They don't know what they're talking about.
No. I wonder how ignorant people are, if some people are just blatantly Bible haters, are Bible haters. I don't know. You can't put it together. But right now in my studies, I am running into the birth of Christ, and in the second coming of Christ, and then and then David had rest from all his enemies from the river to the sea, right? All that's running together with me, so I don't know what kind of Sunday school lessons you're going to get from me or sermons. It's all running together with me right now, all right? But I just wanted you to keep that in mind. It just struck me as I was reading our text I'd probably, have heard that from the river to the sea on the news so much that I'm reading Moab and Edom, the river, and then the Philistines, the sea of the Mediterranean Sea. And by the way, you know what Palestine, the word, stems from? There was a king a long time ago, 2,000 years ago, who named that place Palestine, derogatorily said it to mock Jews, because Jews and Philistines were bitter enemies. It comes from the word Philistine. Palestine comes from our word, Bible word, Philistine. Now, in my mind, those Arabs are not Philistines. They just live in a land called Palestine. So I hope I didn't get too political. But it just struck me, that term I'm hearing on the news, and then what I read from our text. So you Philistines, or excuse me, Palestinians, maybe you're children of David. No, they ain't going to admit that, are they? Absolutely not. So how long has that land been conquered by Israelis and Jews now? 3,000 years. How long have the Palestinians been around? Who knows, right? So just food for thought when you hear that, from the river to the sea. All right. All of that was free this morning. Our text is not going to cover any of that. So we'll, as always, look at the book and see. I know it's helped me a lot when I'm studying for sermonizing from the pulpit and then speaking from this smaller pulpit, to stick with these books, stick to these lessons as much as possible. It's been a blessing to me reading these books and reading these lessons. I hope it has been to you all. I know we don't get to every word of the quarterlies, but it's been a blessing for me. Key verse, page 18, says right there, "And thine house and thine kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever." 2 Samuel 17. What throne? He's talking to who? Who's he talking to? What is the subject? Who's talking? Who's he talking to? And what's the subject under consideration? God is talking to King David, and he says, "Thy throne shall be established forever." So, we know that God occupies time, right? Past, present, and future. He knows the past, he knows the present, he knows the future. He's done seen it. How? I don't know. I'm just a man. I can't explain that, but I believe it. Isn't that what we are to do with God, is just believe what he says the best that we know how? Just believe it. I don't know how that's possible. Only I know this, if it is possible, only God can do it. So believe that. So based on what God's knowledge, he tells David, "Thy kingdom is going to be a kingdom forever." Application, page 18, says the student will learn of David's noble desire and gracious submission to God's will as an example to follow today. Let's start with seeking the context, page 18. While Jesus was ministering in Galilee, two blind men approached him, seeking to be healed. They cried out to him, saying, "Thou Son of David, have mercy on us." Matthew 9:27. What did they mean by calling Jesus the Son of David? Later, Jesus healed a man who was demon-possessed, blind and mute. The people were astonished and asked, "Is not this the Son of David?" Matthew 12:23. What did this question mean? To start the final week of his ministry on earth, Jesus entered into Jerusalem riding on a young colt, and the crowd cried out, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" Matthew 21:9. Why did they call Jesus the Son of David? Our lesson today gives the answer to why Jesus was called the Son of David. First, it simply means that Jesus was from the lineage of David. That's pretty simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mary, Joseph and Mary were what? Of the tribe of Judah. Where was David come from? Of the tribe of Judah, right? He came out of the lineage, the literal lineage, not just of Judah, but of King David himself. Y'all can go back and read all that. We're not going to this morning. So, page 19, top of the page, it says that Matthew 1 through 16, and Luke 3, 23 through 38 give the lineage of Jesus, showing he came through the family of David. But more so, this title referred to those who had the right to rule as king over Israel, and many thought that Jesus came the first time to become king. John 6:15, Acts 1:6. But even more than that, it was one of the prophetic titles pointing to the promised Messiah. I have to ask this question right now. We know Israel's on the news, right? And a lot of us take the news with a grain of salt. Even the news about Israel and their war with Palestine. There's so many questions ministering to me in my mind that I just don't get. Something ain't adding up to me about what's going on over there with the Palestinians and the Jews today. It's just me. But do you think Jesus is ruling and reigning over Jerusalem right now? Huh? That's the question. It says Jesus, he came, right? Without me getting into Christmas message. He came, right? What? Hosanna. King of kings, Lord of lords, Emmanuel, God with us, right? Is he ruling and reigning? Is he the king right now? Well, no, what I'm saying is he's standing in the king's pulpit in Israel today making decisions for Israel. Do we see him on the news? That's what I'm saying. We see a lot of guys from Israel on the news, right? A lot of their leadership giving speeches and saying why, and this is why we're doing it, and this is what's going on. But have you seen Jesus standing in any of them pulpits yet?
No.
Have you seen a man of God? Have you seen a Christian stand in any of those pulpits? No. It's all Judaism, right? But they're King Jesus. Do you think if Jesus was king, he could handle this little problems going on in the world right now? Do you think he's got the wisdom to do so without me getting into this morning's message, which is hard? Like I told y'all, they're all running together with me. You think Jesus can't sort out the problems of this world? Has he not got the wisdom to do that?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't see that happening, right? I just thought I'd point that out. It seems like I'm going to get back to Israel probably every message I preach till Jesus comes again and sorts all that out. But he ain't there, right? If Jesus was there today, we wouldn't be asking these questions about this war, like what's going on, why, when, where, what, who did what, who said what. The things that just aren't adding up to us in our minds while we're observing this. I don't think when Jesus comes and rules, you're going to have that problem. People are going to duck and hide. They ain't going to say a word. Okay, stop there. Let's go on. That second paragraph down from the top on page 19. Jesus explained that the title, Son of David, referred to the Messiah in Matthew 24, 41 through 46, referring to Psalm 110:1. Jesus asked the Pharisees, "How then doth David in the Spirit call him Lord?" Matthew 22:43. How can David call him Lord and yet the Messiah be his son? The answer is that the son of David was much more than simply a descendant of David or the rightful king of Israel. The son of David pointed to the Messiah, the Christ, who is God, Lord and Savior, right? So it's more than just a president. He's not just going to bring, out of the lineage of the king of David, a president. He's the Messiah, right? He's our Messiah, our Savior. He was born in a manger, became our Messiah. He's more than just a good political leader. But trust me on this, he will be that. Perfect. There won't be any news organizations twist or be able to twist any decision he makes towards their agenda. I don't even think news organizations are going to have agendas. I wonder if there's even going to be a Fox News or a CNN anymore after Jesus comes back. I don't think so. I think they're going to be done, right? That Jesus is called the Son of David points to him as the fulfillment of the Davidic covenant. In our lesson for this week, we will learn about the Davidic covenant and the origins of the messianic title, Son of David. And then in bold print there for us to think about, they have a question. What do you know about the title, Son of David? I tell you, to be honest truth, sometimes you just assume some things and move on, but to give serious thought to the title that they were trying to give Jesus, which was a true title, was the Son of David. So have you thought about Jesus being the Son of David? I mean, he is our Messiah, right? But being the Son of David will make him what? Rightful heir to the throne of Israel through David's lineage, right? So if he's leading over there today, he's doing a poor job. That's why we believe that he's not, right? When he comes back, there'll be no doubt about who he is, and the decisions he makes are going to not be detrimental for Israel. It's going to be good for Israel. And a matter of fact, if I've learned correctly, the whole world. The whole world are going to, it's the decisions he makes from there is going to be good for everybody. All these boundaries and states and countries and nations and all their lines and borders, I don't even know how much of that's going to be intact after Jesus comes back. If I read Revelation correctly, there's going to be an upheaval. There's going to be an upheaval from outer space. There's going to be an upheaval in the atmosphere. And if I've learned correctly from Revelations, there's going to be upheavals in the earth itself. Things are going to change when Jesus comes back. So I don't know how much value you want to place on the United States of America, Canada, China, Russia. I don't know how much you want to pour into those, I don't even know if they're even going to be around when the Jesus comes back. Things are going to change dramatically. Will those people think like Soviets? What are you going to do with that? Communists. Will those people think like Muslims, Islamists? What are you going to do with that people? You can't change their minds, right? Communists, they love their communism, right? Well, Americans in their socialism, well, we're not socialists. We're a democracy. We have communism, socialism, real close. We're Americans. Those people right there believe in American-style democracy. What are we going to do with that? I don't know when Jesus comes back. Do you think any of that's going to matter? Socialism, Islamism, Islamic behavior, capitalism, democracies, communism. Who knows? Is even any of that even going to matter? I like to believe that all of that is going to be exposed. Is there good? Is there some good to communism? Maybe. Is there something good to socialism? Is there something good to the... There may be good parts in all of it. You know, there may be something... You know, look at Israel. In ancient Israel, man, what did they seem like to you? If you read through it, a socialist. Old ancient Israel seemed a little bit social to me, right? Tax. Did did the prophet not warn that the kings that you over is going to tax your boys, put them to war, make decisions like that? And that's been Israel's existence, right? So Jesus is going to come back. I didn't mean to get on that. We ain't even got to the text yet. But there's a lot of food for thought. And that question he asked, what do you know about the title, Son of David? Give it some thought. You know, they give you 3 lines to write on here. I wouldn't know what to write there. I couldn't do it in 3 lines. You know, I've taken up 10 minutes of your time talking about it. So how could I write about it? All right. Now we're going to get to the text for today's Bible study lesson. David's desire to build the temple. You know what brought about David's desire to build this temple was God gave him rest from Moab to Edom, the river. Gave him rest over all the Philistines, right? All the way to the sea, from the river to the sea. And then he had been getting tribute from nations up around the Euphrates River. That's all the way up there. So, wow, things are so good. Things are just so wonderful. David decides, I'm living in a house made of cedar, and the Lord's living in a tent. You know, we have the Ark of the Covenant in a tent. You know, the mercy seat and Ark of the Covenant. So David decides, I'm going to build. He has a desire after all the fighting and the throwdown is done, but it ain't done, by the way. That stuff's going to rear its head in David's kingship later on. So David decides, I want to build the Lord a house. And that's where we are. David's desire to build the temple. Verse 4, 2 Samuel 7:4. And it came to pass that night that the word of the Lord came unto Nathan, saying, I'll go ahead and point out here. First, you've heard of this dude, Nathan, in the Bible. I think David and Nathan were friends. I think that's the kind of friends David had. You know, when David was going through all that turmoil with Saul in the beginning of Saul's reign, that you find David around the tabernacle, you know, kind of looking at it from the woods, checking out the tabernacle, and then going in there, right? Remember that? And getting the sword and some manna and things like that. His life, I believe, revolved around the temple, God's people, prophets, priests. I think that's the kind of people he liked and loved. And here's Nathan. He told Nathan his desire I want to build God a house. And Nathan goes, go ahead, David. You know, they're buddies. I think they're friends. I think they're close. Pretty close as a king can get to a regular human. Nathan's not a regular human. He is a prophet of God, right? So God came into Nathan and he saying, verse 5, Go and tell my servant David, Thus saith the Lord, Shalt thou build me an house for me to dwell in? And then the commentary on page 19, King David had a rough start to his kingship. For 7.5 years, David reigned only in Judah and was at war with the rest of the tribes of Israel, 2 Samuel 3:1. Once the other tribes agreed to David's kingship, there was battles to fight against the Jebusites, the Philistines, the Moabites, and many other people groups in the promised land, the Lord gave David many great victories. As we open 2 Samuel chapter 7, so much needed rest. Page 20. The rest afforded David time to think and consider other works besides fighting battles. So he's in between wars. David was a smart man, right? He's a good general. I mean, he won his battles primarily because he'd go to the Lord, right? And ask the Lord, should I or shouldn't I? And the Lord would say whether he should or shouldn't. And most of the time, yeah, go ahead. But sometimes he would say, don't do that, do this. God would say that. So David has subdued the enemies, right? Now he wants to build. And he says here, the rest afforded David time to think. He's talking about David's rest, period, between wars. David's thoughts immediately went to the Ark of God, which had recently been brought up to Jerusalem, 2 Samuel 6:16. While David was enjoying the comforts of the fine cedar palace, the ark was housed in a tent. The discrepancy was just too much for David. Why should the king's house be a palace, while the house of God was just a tent? God should have a house much grander than a king. David wanted to build God a magnificent temple. I think that's very noble of David, right? Second paragraph, King David shared his heart's desire with the prophet Nathan. And Nathan encouraged him to pursue it. But during the night, God came to Nathan with a message for David. 2 Samuel 7:5. Express the Lord's words in a question. Shalt thou build me an house for me to dwell in? 1 Chronicles 17:4 expressed that the Lord's words in a prohibition. Thou shalt not build me a house to dwell in. The Lord hath spoken, and David would not build the temple of God. Right? David wanted to build God a temple. Told Nathan. Nathan says, go right ahead. You know, they're friends. They're buddies. And when you talk to your friends and you're going to do something, don't they encourage you? But Nathan was more than a friend. He was also a prophet. So God came to Nathan in the night and said, Nathan, you go tell David this for me. Surely we admire David's heart and desire to build a temple for the Lord. Even the Lord said, whereas it was in thine heart to build an house unto my name, thou didst it well that it was in thine heart. 1 Kings 8:18. Like David, we should look around, see the things we have, and consider in comparison how much we give to the Lord. Ooh, boy, is this guy meddling right here? Isn't that what preachers do? They don't do it on purpose, but they can't help it, right? I lost my place. But we also are reminded that we can only do for the Lord what He allows in accordance with His will. God's temple would be built not by David. The Lord had other plans for David. And then at the end of that paragraph, the writer puts, why do you think God would not allow David to build his temple? Now, this is a question that I've heard people preach on, talk about, learned people, educated theologians talk about why God wouldn't let him do it. Probably the main argument against David building God a temple was David had blood on his hands because he was a warrior. Right? He killed, I don't know how many people David killed personally, but I know he killed one giant. Remember that? And through his being a general in the military, he brought about much war, much bloodshed came through David's decisions, right? And this is the main reason why people say that God didn't allow him to, and this is what I thought and believe, and I still believe that. Maybe he, but I put it in another way. You know what David's job was as king of Israel? This was his job. Whip the Moabites, whip the Edomites, whip the parasites and all the other sites you could find, whip the Philistines. That was his job, General David was to do. He was to go and conquer, and that's what he did. So maybe his calling was not to be a house builder of God, but a warrior of God. Conquer the enemies of God. From the river, am I being political? From the river to the sea. You thought that was brand new. You just heard that on the news, right? They're crying from the river to the sea. You never guessed it was the 3,000-year-old saying, was it? David whipped the enemies of God from the river, the Jordan River, to the Mediterranean Sea. How about that? A 3,000-year-old. And I'm guessing at that time, a 3,000-year-old. But anyway, this was David's job. David subdued the enemies of God, and he did it well. Now he wants to build a temple for God. And God says, nope, that's not your job. But guess what? David's going to have a son, and I probably shouldn't get into it this morning. And he's going to pray for something. God asked this boy, whatever your heart's desire is, ask of me, and I'll give it. And the boy said, I just want wisdom from heaven. Guess who's going to build that temple? David's son, Solomon. Probably a lesson just a little further on down the road, right? Not going to get into it too much. So the writer asks, why do you think God would not allow David to build his temple? So I guess a good simple answer might be, and it would be a good one, I don't think it'd be incorrect, he had blood on his hands. Solomon wasn't known for that, to be a great, mighty warrior, a killer of enemy. He wasn't known for that at all, Solomon, but David was, right? So God says, David. So the writer poses the question, and I just say, you think about it. And I don't think you'd be wrong with whatever answer you came up with. I think it all melds together, right? I just give you because I am standing here, I am teaching, I felt like I should give my opinion on that subject right there. Yeah, he had blood on his hands. His job was not to build temples. His job was to wipe them out. And not God's temples, but you know what I'm talking about. When a king in David's day went and whipped up on a Moabite, that means they whipped up on the Moabites' gods too. Edomites whipped up on their gods. Philistines, he went and whipped up on their gods as well. So he was a destroyer of those sort of things. So God told Nathan, go tell him no. Let's read on page 20. Ooh. We're getting too, oh man, where'd the time go? That's what happens when you get political. You waste time, don't you? Okay, close the book. We don't have time to go on. But I will ask you a question. Without getting political. In this day and age, it's hard. Well, if you watch the news, you see Israel, God's people right in the middle of the news and wars. You just can't help it. But let me ask you this. When you think of Moab and Edom, based on what I've said this morning, what conclusion can you come with? Where were those people? Where were they? How's that? Where were those nations? Where were the nations of the Moabs and the Edomites? Along the river Jordan, right? And when you think of the Philistines, where were all of their cities? Along the Mediterranean Sea, right? You know, well, I ain't going to get into it, but so God gave him rest. And then we find it from the Euphrates River, that's way up there in Turkey, people contributing to David as far as money and things go. So keep that in mind. Keep this in mind. David was a warrior. His job was to subdue the enemies of God, and he did it. He did it well. That's what his main thing was. And God wouldn't allow him to build the temple. He said, I'll build you a house. You're not going to build me a house. I'm going to build you one, God said. So that's going to wrap up today's lesson. I appreciate your attention. Appreciate you being here. Let's all stand.